turn off my tunes and we'll get rolling. I hope everybody's having a good day. I appreciate you all getting on with us. We got a big group this morning. I like this. Thank you all. Fantastic. All right, we are here for lower back strategies, working with the older adults. Let me make sure my volume is up. That didn't sound like KISS. You're right. It was actually KISS Radio. You guys are fantastic. That's awesome. You remember that. It's KISS Radio, but that was rad. So very good. You got a good ear. I love it. Okay, my microphone is all the way up. We are good. And let's get rolling. Okay, so this is it. This is the 7 and then a bonus. You can all see that, right? No problem? We're good? Okay, I'm kidding. I'll send you that afterwards. If you want it, shoot me an email and we'll get it over to you. Keegan will probably type it up for us a little later on today. I am shoeless because I have a couple of different exercises to show you where I'm taking bands on and off. However, I am going to show you exercises where I'm holding weights, and I do not recommend you not having shoes on with your clients if you're manipulating weight. So not a great example, but disclaimer has been put up, so now you know. We are going to start with something called abdominal bracing, okay? Abdominal bracing. The best example I can give you, the best way that this was taught to me, and you guys should all see me okay down here on the floor. Abdominal bracing is basically a way for me to contract my core down without lifting my butt up, okay? Without pulling my head and my shoulders back. And kind of like if someone were gonna, like with me, when little kids come running at me and their head is level with my protected area, you kind of brace up, like you tense up, you're ready for impact. That's basically what this is. So more or less, you're gonna start with your client sitting on the floor, or laying on the floor, laying on a bench, on a box, wherever you can get them on. And there's a little gap, right? A little lumbar curve that you can basically slide your fingers underneath. From that position, without tilting my pelvic spine, without flattening my back, or lowering my lumbar spine, excuse me, I want to try to brace and pull down and then relax. Brace and pull down and relax. Some people use the cue withdrawing. So I want to withdraw my belly button down and relax. And it's like I'm trying to reverse crunch. Instead of pulling my abs, down and crunching myself short, I want to pull my belly button in. I want to withdraw it in and flatten my spine, but without using my legs to do so by lifting my butt up. So we're withdrawing, abdominal bracing, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 seconds, and relax. 1, 2, 3, and relax. And you'd be surprised how great a benefit this is for the client that is suffering from some type of herniated disc, ruptured touchy. They're probably in worse shape than they can do that at the moment. Bulging discs, sciatica, it's more or less teaching them a bracing around their spine, coming up that lumbar column, rather than relying on the structure of the lumbar to support them in the first place. So we're bracing against the cavity rather than allowing everything else to work down against it. Does that make sense? So something you can practice with the client is just basic abdominal bracing. Any of our clients that have that like lower back check by their name, we'll ask them to do abdominal bracing during their movement prep, during their warm-up series. And they'll get down and get ready to do their 20 bridges for the day, and they'll do abdominal bracing first, 10 or 15 3-second holds, just to kind of get that area firing a little bit. And so many of them report, how tension relieving that is and how much better they feel after doing so. On the other side of it, you're creating a tiny bit of traction. They're laying down, they're allowing the lumbar to relax, teaching the muscle fiber around that area to fire to help stabilize them. So it's a good starting point to kind of introduce with people and get that musculature going to start off their day, okay? Really can't do like too much of that either, so don't worry about putting those in as maybe active recoveries. All right, next one, deloaded hinge with a deduction. So the The deloaded hinge, I'm going to show you a different variation of it today using my NT bands. The component to this that really makes the difference is the abduction of the band. And I'm using one of my Brett Contreras Elite bands here. All right. And then getting into my band, my NT band, I'm going to brace in to grip inside my elbow, so I'm inside the brace, okay? Two things are going on here. I'm engaging, retracting my shoulder blades, putting my shoulder blades in my back pocket. I'm pushing, so the band here is winning. Now I'm resisting it. Everybody see that? The band is winning, I'm resisting it. So I'm abducting, kind of corkscrewing my glutes in. I'm retracting my shoulder blades, so I'm engaging. And then as I hinge, I'm pushing my butt up, allowing my hamstrings to stretch, and allowing the band, if I relaxed, see all that range of motion that just came up? I want all that pressure that I'm now protruding down here against the band to come up through traction through my spine. So just by doing here, as I push myself down, I'm engaging my arms, everything's kind of locked in, I'm relaxing my back for a second, and I'm allowing the pressure of the band to pull up through me, through my core, and that's creating a little traction, a little deload every time I come down in my hinge. Abduction, the three glutes are on, rather than just one. If I don't have this band on, getting my abductors to fire to help me while performing my hinges. Another thing we can do, which is helpful, you the trainer, or I can see in the camera right here, if I'm favoring, you'll see one knee bow out, you'll see a shift on my hinge, you'll see my hips go off to one side. Using the coach cue in front of you or using a mirror in front of you does allow you to help come down to your hinge and then take a look and see how even you are. We want our clients to feel how even they are and not just look the whole time and be like, oh, I'm supposed to be over here. No, I'm crooked. You want to get them to feel that sensation, because through their day when they're doing their hinges, they're not going to be able to look up, take a look at the mirror and see if they're even or not, right? So abduction here, pulling apart, don't let this hourglass, okay, keep winning. Get those glutes to fire. What did I do? 10, and I already feel them going right now. So taking pressure off of my back, especially through the hinge position, with a proper hinge, with all the musculature around that hinge is on. If I don't have this band on and I'm not abducting, just my glute max is basically the only one that's really engaging to help me. I need that corkscrew effect, that engagement there. And you're going to see this on like 4 of these movements. We're going to have this guy on for all of them because I want that abduction to activate and to help me out, to take pressure from my lumbar. Deloading is great. You can use these guys too. Waddle over here real quick. You can use these guys too. You know, looping those up top. These ones have the handles built in. That's fine. I like this one because it keeps it a little bit closer to you. You're kind of in the middle. You know, you're in the middle of the band. Really working that protrusion as you come down there and allowing that band to pull back on you. All right, I'm going to jump number 3 just because I have my band on. And I'm going to go to band abduction sit to stands. This guy, a couple different toys here to try this with. Getting decent at these with my hips. So I'm going to show you side angle here first. This guy, down my way. All right, so shoulder width apart, into my chair, abduction, my band is on. I'm going to displace, put myself back over the chair, engage, deload, chest up tall, re-engage. I'm going to continue to push out, abduct the whole time I'm doing this. Every time we come down, abductors are on, but I'm trying to relax everything else. That's kind of the key to this whole thing, is that if I sit down and I keep the tension, I don't deload, I don't take a seat, I'm not getting the practice each time of re-engaging the muscle fiber, shutting it off. Re-engaging the muscle fiber and shutting it off. Now on the flip side of that, if you have someone whose back is really inflamed and really bothering them, but they're still in here trying to train, we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to fire it. It's violent like that every time the muscle fibers, that happens, okay? So the active myosin heads are relaxed and they engage, and then they relax, and then they engage, and it's semi-violent, you know, internally there as it happens. So with those individuals, you have the abductors on, and just have them kiss it and return. Have them kiss it and return. If you can, we come down and we deload, take the momentum away, Re-engage, keep that abduction on, okay? Big key component to that. If your chair is too low, your bench is too low, put in a pad. These little airtight pads are 2-inch additions. You can adjust the height. You see how much easier I can perform that there just by a little addition of 2 inches. Get me to fire those guys as we go. Band skier squats. This is band aided. Get it? Band aided. Band aided. Terrible jokes. That's what you call a dad joke. And the more dad I am, the years of this, the worse my dad jokes are getting, or I guess the better my dad jokes are getting. Okay, so I'm self-anchored. I'll turn and show you this from the front here in a second too. We're self-anchored, which means I'm engaging, I've got resistance. I have my AB ductors on, so my glutes are firing. I'm engaging my shoulder blades. As I stand tall, I would normally get a great deal of tension here if I were doing like a regular sit-to-stand, right? So as we come down, how are we gonna do a skier squat and add resistance? We're gonna flip our grip, get into a bicep curl position, thinker position, hand to chin position here. Now watch my shoulders. I'm retracting, I'm flattening. You can see my arms are shaking, I'm on, right? So I'm trying to flatten my back as much as possible as I go into my skier squat, butt up, hamstrings are shaking, my arms are shaking, abductors are on, hamstrings are loaded. I'm sitting at a decent flexion in the hip. My pressure through my back is pretty minimal as long as I'm holding this position pretty well. I'm gonna demo a bad one. You see how much I just came out, right? So now when I come up and down, my lumbar is taking all the pressure. If I can't retract and hold fairly flat, this is pointless. I don't even need that. I can just do my skier squat with the abduction and my palms up, and I'm gonna get pretty good activation in there as I do this, okay? My glutes are on fire, by the way, right now. Demoing all these in a row. All right, so that's the skier squat, the sit-to-stand abduction. Last one with this on is the traction hinge. So let me show you that one. A lot of these, through trial and error, is how I kind of came up with them. A lot of them have been personal ones as well. I forgot to show you that from the front. I'm sorry. If somebody wants to see it from the front, shoot a comment up there. If not, I'll come back to it afterwards. All right. So our traction, actually this guy goes up here. Okay, we have the NT band at hip height. I'm feeling tension through my hips. I'm gonna move myself forward where I'm getting a little bit of pull from the band that's gonna pull me back. I'm gonna put this guy around both arms above the elbow because I need it over my arm. So when I retract, I'm getting retraction through my shoulder blades. I'm gonna sit back in my hinge, let the band pull me. As I stand up and I pull my hips through, I'm getting a little bit of traction here where the band pulling me back. But the whole time I'm doing this action, my rhomboids, my posterior delt, my lats, all backside of my body is on. My hamstrings are learning to work with my glutes. Glutes are learning to work with my erectors. Erectors are learning to work with the lats. Lats are learning to work with the rhomboids. Rhomboids learning to work with the posterior delt. Posterior delt's learning to work with the levator scapulae. All of this up the posterior chain. The more musculature you have on while performing hinges or squats, the more pressure you're going to take off your back. That's really what I'm trying to get across in the majority of these movements, to reduce the lumbar pressure, and that's where 90% of our back pain is coming from. We need to turn on more musculatures. As Lee Brandon would say, those lights are off, you need to turn those lights on or learn how to turn those lights on. So that's what we're doing in most of these, is we're trying to get into positions and add little resistances here and there that make more of those muscle fibers turn on and take some of the pressure, some of the load to engage and help you. You can hear my breathing. I'm going, I'm sweating, you guys. Like, this is just in these couple that I've demoed. I'm not in terrible shape. I'm in pretty decent shape to do this stuff. It's just work. You know, what I do 10 of those, and I'm gassed from it a little bit. This retraction to pull back in here, it lights up the whole back side. Hamstrings, glutes, calves, all the way down to my feet are all lit up trying to counter this weight through here. So the one breaking hinge point in the middle, musculature above it is on, musculature below it's definitely on. that hinge point in the middle doesn't have to do much. It just has to hinge. Where when we watch someone just walk over to a bench or to a chair and they bend over to get their shoes and they come back up, nothing was on. So the only thing they're using is an eccentric hamstring stretch and their lumbar, rounding around all that bony structure, putting everything in the wrong spot. Then they turn their erectors on and they pull themselves back up, right? So we're getting ourselves into more and more bad positions by turning on less musculature. If we can practice building some of the strength in here and practice those movement patterns, when that situation occurs, at least there's more support around the lumbar to help prevent some of the pains that are going to come that way, okay? So that's our traction hinge. We call it a two-band because you have one ear that's retracting around, the other one's around the head. It does pull up and back on you a little bit, so you get a little traction relief from that guy. We did the band skier squat. That was the one I did this way. I will show you one from the front here real quick. You guys pretend I have my other band on. The self-anchor position. I'll show you this as well. A lot of people ask how we rig that up. Hold this up, right in the middle, and let go. Very simple, okay? That's probably the email I think I've received the most. Can't figure out how you're hooking that band to people's feet. And I always feel like a genius because I'm like, hey, I figured out something nobody else knows. No, pretty simple. Palm up, bicep curl to the chin, retract, pull back, everything's engaged. See my arms are on, they're shaking. Butt up, flat, shoulders back, come down, deload. Butt up, shoulders back, come down, deload. If it's too much tension, I go without it. Same action. You can take a small, like a mini band right here, and do a no money around the hands and pull apart. So you're getting that shoulder retraction without the pressure pulling down. So imagine I'm here doing that, pulling apart, retract, and return. I can still get that upper half fiber, the upper half of the body fiber going without that vertical pressure pulling me down, okay? So that's the skier squat. I showed you the abduction sit to stand with the band in between. And I think that's all my one standing as far as the bands go, yes. Okay, next couple. This one I learned from John Hoffman. This is a really good exercise. This helped me a ton when I was going through some of my rehab for my back, for my hips. We started, and I'm using a dumbbell and a kettlebell to show you the options if you have fat bells, whatever you have that might work. Definitely want a knee pad on the floor for this. And then my back foot, if you can see that there, see how my toes engaging? I don't want to be like so. We've covered this, dorsiflexed. We've covered this before where my front foot's going to demo. My toes pointed down, this leg is relaxed. Pretend that's the one on the floor. And then when I put my weight on it, see my kneecap moving? When I pull my toe up, nothing's happening now, okay? When you are kneeling down on your body with all your body weight on this one knee, and you point your toe, that kneecap's just kind of floating back and forth. And now the patellar ligament and the patellar tendon are now trying to stabilize all of your body weight on a floating kneecap. So we pretty much always want to have that back toe tucked underneath. The rare occasion is if you're doing like a child's pose where you're pointing your toes and you're trying to sit back into that range of motion. There's really minimal movement there and we don't have extra load, right? So pretty much anytime we're kneeling or half kneeling, we're asking our clients to tuck their toes underneath, to dorsiflex, if you will, pull the toe up rather than plantar flex, okay? So I'm dorsiflexing this back leg. Kettlebell option first. Single arm, upright. We're gonna hold in this position. We're gonna do transfers eventually with this. But for right now, we're just gonna do isometrics. And this is a contralateral isometric. I feel my left lumbar going, active. I'm feeling my obliques on the front right. And basically, we're just stabilizing here. We're gonna hold for 30 seconds. This is called a bottoms up contralateral isometric hold. I know that's a huge mouthful. I'm sure we could come up with some cool, bottoms up pirate positions, whatever you wanna call it. So isometric holding here for 30 seconds, okay? With a dumbbell, see my grip here? We call that a hamburger grip. Like if you're holding a big hamburger together, okay? So half a hamburger grip, whatever you wanna call it. I'm gonna tilt this guy upright. I'm gonna engage and squeeze that. Why do I not wanna do this? Okay, see the weird angle of my wrist, pivots my elbow underneath. So I want this guy to be as neutral as I can get it. And then if this is, 10 pounds, which it is, and I'm not quite ready for the kettlebell yet, or I'm not ready for the stability, then I'm simulating the wrist component that I'm gonna train by grabbing that kettlebell handle. I'm simulating that wrist angle as close as I can to build the strength in here, to deviate this dumbbell and to stabilize it, right? So now I'm holding this contralateral position. Let's say we do 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna switch that, come to this side, same angles, fatigue. I'm feeling erector in the back still, but opposite oblique because I switched my stabilizers at the bottom. So now I'm getting both obliques to fire, still my erector on the left side, that's my counterweight. That's the one that's gonna be opposite low because I'm carrying opposite high, okay? So I hold that for 30 seconds, and then I can switch, and you can do like a suitcase on one side, and I'm gonna feel this more upper rhomboid posterior delt on the right, because upper high stabilizing for lower low load. It's always gonna be opposite, okay? Wherever you're Xing on your body, wherever the load is, the opposite side is gonna be the stabilizer. So we're trying to work lumbar components without a lot of movement, basically isometrics without planking. We're doing a wall sit, specifically addressing the lumbar itself, or the QL or any of the obliques are gonna help stabilize around that. Just these contralateral, ipsilateral positions to help you learn and build the strength in there is gonna help coordinate as we transfer through the weight room, the rest of our workout, the rest of our day, okay? So after we master that half kneeling, then we can transfer the load, and I'll show a couple demos here, obviously not going very far. Position to start off, down at the side, suitcase carry, we get better at that. We take them up into a racked position, kettlebell or dumbbell, either one. Okay, they can hold the dumbbell horizontal, get better with that. Eventually, ideal is the bottoms up because so much stability work is going on at the wrist, and that trickles down to the elbow, to the shoulder, everything corkscrews in, and then as I'm carrying, I'm trying very smooth to transfer forward, very smooth to transfer my weight back, okay? And that transfer, a lot of opposite side dominance here to help me stabilize that weight while I'm doing my forward and backs, okay? So working with some fairly heavy loads, if they have trouble transitioning the weight up, put the hand on this side, bring it to the up position, let go. I like to keep this hand here too for the first couple times. So if they're going and they start to lose the weight, they've got their hand there to protect their face, right? Or to help them from keeping this yanking, twisting action to affect them on the way down, okay? Same thing with the dumbbell, same action. Working that grip, bring it up, get it secured in here, get it locked down, forward, steady steps, backwards, steady steps. Okay, so those are our carries. All right, abdominal bracing we got, deloaded hinges we have, carries we got, self-anchor bridge, I'm gonna show you that in just a second. Sit to stand skiers, and then the traction hinge, we got all those. We'll get into the bonus here in just a second. The one I wanna show you to finish, these positions that we just addressed here for the carry, same idea on the floor. If I am working on supporting or stabilizing a load, consistent load in a vertical position, and then as I take that vertical position and I try to transfer myself forward, backward, side to side, wherever I go, I'm getting pressure that's consistent from one load, not changing, doesn't get harder or easier, it stays, right? And then I'm telegraphing or projecting myself forward, and my body can anticipate how much it's gonna have to accelerate, decelerate, slow, and stabilize that weight. So to counter that, to work on our forward flexion extension, side stability, we work into half kneeling positions with a progressive resistant load. Notice my toe in the back, tucked in, kneecap is tight, chest is up tall, brace leg is slightly in front. If I were gonna do a split squat, I would have my foot here. 90 and 90, that's gonna allow me opportunity to come up and down smooth. Because I'm gonna brace against this fairly heavy load, I'm gonna prop my leg out in front of me a little bit, even dorsiflex this foot a little bit. Chest up nice and tall, I'm gonna work on retracting my shoulder blades first, rowing to my chest, letting it out slow, retract and row, let it out slow. Okay, working my left arm, or excuse me, my left leg as the brace leg. I'm going to feel quad, glute dominant on this side, glute, hip flexor dominant to stabilize me on this side. Now, whatever number I'm doing, let's say we're doing 20, at 10, I want to switch feet, okay? So I've knocked out 10 on this side. Now I've got both stabilizers on both sides working. Easy enough to switch to the bottom half. The upper half is always going to be bilaterally kind of stabilized here. And my made-up term is bilateral dominance. As I start to get tired in this, even though you guys can't see it, I am purposely pulling with my left arm more right now, okay? So I don't know if there's a lot that you can do about that other than cueing it, seeing it, trying to get them to correct. So one of the best options we do is get rid of it. Contralateral position, other hand here. I can see my range of motion, if it gets all the way to my chest or not. I'm working my opposite. Okay, remember the cross corner we just talked about? I'm pulling pressure. It's trying to get me to go forward. This opposite side lumbar extensor is going to stabilize me in place. As I'm rowing and pulling and getting a little bit of thoracic rotation with my pull start, remember we want a little bit of thoracic rotation. As long as our hips are stable, we're good. You can twist up to 30 degrees in either way, thoracic rotation from a neutral spine or neutral hip. And for the most part, with a healthy-ish human being with a healthy lower back, that would be just fine. Beyond that, where you're twisting all the way to 45 or anywhere close to 90, you're putting a lot of pressure on that back, especially if it's damaged. You're probably going to hurt somebody, okay? So then we're going to go still left arm, left leg, so we're ipsilateral setup, locking my toe in, retract and pull, retract and pull. As I pull this, the band is trying to twist my whole body, and I've lost my opposite side, my contralateral stabilizer. So what's going to hold me in place? Opposite side erectors in the back. I have to trust my lower back, my lower left lumbar, my lower left erector, my QL back there to help stabilize me, or else the band is going to twist and pull me forward and throw me flat down on my face, right? So progressions you can go, split stance, bilateral rowing, split stance, unilateral rowing in a contralateral setup, and then unilateral rowing, ipsilateral stance, ipsilateral side, okay? So you can build up into these components from bilateral to contralateral to ipsilateral and build that structure of spine and lumbar support to help you stabilize this. The progressive resistance allows an opportunity for your body to anticipate a heavier load coming, to brace down, to engage, to recruit a little heavier than it normally would, and then to let out and kind of get a moment to relax for a second. That's where the progressive resistance, when you're working with individuals that are injured or that have physical limitations, is such a great tool. It's like the middle ground. But with many people, you're not going to progress to heavier lifting, so it's the high ground. For someone like myself, my days of lifting heavier, consistent load, like set bars at 135, etc., those days are over for me. And it was an ego issue for a long time. But every time I try to reintroduce that, it's too aggressive of a jump, or it's too much, too much pressure for my body to consistently move one set load through a range of motion that my body's just not structurally built to handle anymore. And now the physical therapist in me would argue, I'm not one, but my mindset of that would argue, well, if you rehabilitated and built strength in that area enough, and you weren't overloading it, then you should successfully be able to do that. It's such a fine line that I have found. And the steps are so small, the progressions are so small, that it's more frustrating for me than anything. Where I've been able to go from 20-pound bands to 40-pound bands to 80-pound bands in a couple of weeks and feel great moving through this the whole time because of the progressive resistance and the regressive resistance as I work away or into more vulnerable or weaker areas. And then I can challenge myself through that just by moving back a little bit with the same load. Even though I can't, prescribe to be like, oh, you're, 80 pounds for this. I can say I'm the black band at the 3-foot line, and I know that I'm there for now. and then doing the black band at the 4-foot line. And then I'm going to do the yellow band at the 3-foot line, yellow band at the 4-foot line, and see my progression that way. Okay. So there's a tool for every job, for every need, in my opinion, and it's just figuring out what the best tool is per client, per person. And in some cases, I've just got some people that, you know, consistent loads. I keep looking past here because we have all of our bars set up out here right behind you for all of our glute bridging that we're doing this week. And we have our non-older adults, our clients that are, you know, 30 to 50-ish. They're bench pressing this week as well. One of the rare times that we do a barbell bench press. Maybe twice a year that we do that, 3 times a year. So they're having that opportunity this week. So those consistent loads, you know, those tools fit for those people, but the majority of my clientele, we just don't do that anymore. So a good opportunity here to bridge with somebody with a lumbar or a low back limitation. We've gone through the basic steps of bridging. Shoulder blades are retracted, elbows are going to pull down, toes are going to be up, knees are bent in about a 45-degree, maybe 50-degree angle. And then I'm going to lift as one, wheelbarrow my chest up, and return, wheelbarrow up, return. To keep the shoulder blade retraction, to keep my chest up so I can wheelbarrow, but to add progressive resistance, we're going to do self-anchor. These are 3 mini bands. I just want to show you another option. This is a extra large mini band, 3 yellow, so I just move them all together. So you don't have to go out and buy other bands if you have a bunch of these. Every time we replace them, basically, we buy 10 mini bands of each color. And as soon as like 3 or 4 of them start to wear down, I buy 10 new ones. And I pull all the old ones off. And we use those if clients want a pair when they travel, we'll just give them to them, or we'll use them to create some anchors like this. So I've got a ton of these, right? So I'm going palms up, that keeps my shoulder blades retracted. I'm engaging and pulling down, and then as I wheelbarrow up, I'm able to keep that posterior chain on. So now my bridge, that was just kind of like glute hamstring dominant, has become upper half dominant as well. I'm getting my rhomboid, lat, erectors, all the muscles I talked about earlier with the retraction, those are all on. So now the whole posterior chain basically is on while bridging, and I've gone beyond body weight, but not quite the consistent load yet. So instead of grabbing like a 40-pound bag and throwing it on my lap where it's always 40 pounds, I can take this and grab, I don't know, 15 pounds of pressure here. And as I bridge up, it's probably about 40 there, and then back to about 15. 40, and then 15. And I can work through that range, develop the strength that I need when my hips are at its strongest position, which if I was standing up right now, that would be vertical, right? I have the most load pulling down through the band. As I come down and I start to break or get into a weaker position, more flexion, or if I were standing in a hinged position, I'm more exposed to the opportunity of becoming injured, okay? Doesn't mean that I'm gonna get injured here. It just means that I'm more exposed to the opportunity to injure myself. The band and the load gets lighter. And so we work through that progressive range through the majority of these movements to build the strength. And as our client gets that strength in there, we could say, well, if this is 40 pounds at the top and 15 at the bottom or somewhere around there is kind of what we're estimating, maybe if we gave them a 20-pound sandbag and watched them bridge through a full range of motion, we could say consistent load-wise, they're pretty good with this amount of weight. I can move 20 pounds through my full range of motion. How are we going to break into a 40-pound sandbag or a heavier consistent load? We're going to up this guy, practice the feeling of walking out with a heavier load and having a slightly heavier load at the bottom, building that strength component, then we'll go to a red bag. And so you use this progressive resistance, you use this, you use this, you use these tools to build, to gap, to bridge to the next rung with each piece of this that you are building for your client. And in some cases, with some people, myself being a good example, I have maybe 3 other clients, 2 other clients that, you know, any type of hinging for the foreseeable future, we're not using consistent load, but we're seeing great progressions. Even up to the point where we're up to like our green bands in the back, 2-inch bands, 80 pounds, 100 pounds of pressure at the top. But I give him 65 pounds on a bar and watch him do rack pulls, and it bugs him. You know, it's that progressive tension, the activation, the retraction. Like, we don't get that feeling necessarily when holding one consistent load for the whole period of time. All right. Okay. I think I'm pretty wrapped up. I'm about 5 minutes over. Abdominal bracing can be done during movement prep. We talked about that. Pulling down, trying to flatten. Don't lift your butt. Deloaded hinge with abduction. That was this guy up top with the band pulling apart. Remember the corkscrew? You got to keep those legs on. The single arm, bottoms up, isometric hold or carries. Okay, you can go in any direction with those. I love doing them backwards, forward, side to side. You can put bands on while they do laterals, right? Like build your pieces together. Self-anchor bridge, the one I just showed you. Abduction, sit to stand, band around the knees, sit down, stand up. Abduction, skier squat, load, unload. Add the band, bicep curl if you need it. The traction around the hip with the abduction, retraction of the shoulder blade. Okay, the band in the hinge position there. And then your half kneeling rows from bilateral, half kneeling to contralateral to ipsilateral. I think that covers it. If there are any questions, I'm going to come up here and check. If anyone has anything else they'd like to bring up, now is the moment to do so. Let me check out my chats here really quick. And just awesome comments from Diane about my music. Awesome. And we have one question. Do you think most back pain stems from poor hip alignment, strength, and decreased hip alignment / strength and decreased strength? Is that something you want to get into? So that's a question from my wife because of our personal experience. My back, what she's talking about is my back limitations came from, my hip limitations came from my back dominant way of lifting through the world, moving myself through the world. Because my hips were so tight, I didn't work on mobility with them, and I didn't know what glute training was. I thought the glutes were accessory muscles that would just assist and get trained when squatting and doing, split squats and lunges and other, high step ups, that kind of stuff. Before I opened my own gym, even 5 years ago, I never targeted the glutes ever with a single movement. And so I'm training my glutes right now, though that never came out of my mouth. The glute was a secondary. The glute was, the anterior delt. It was something that got work through everything else. I would never target it. All my shoulder work was posterior delt focused because anterior delt got so much work. That was my mindset for my glute. But not really understanding how the body worked terribly efficiently. And until my hips started to fail, I didn't really get my mind around the idea of how that accompanied and how great, how much pressure the hip sat under if the back was having to take most of the load, whatever's underneath that's having to take it as well. So if I could have built more mobility and a greater deal of strength in my glutes, I think that would have taken a ton of pressure off of my back and helped me a ton there. My obsession with training just a ton every day and voluming all of my lifts to a max. I would spend 3-4 hours, a day lifting. I didn't have much of a life. I went to school, I threw, and I would lift, and that was my cycle. The volume is what destroyed me. It wasn't necessarily the movements that I did. It was just so much. I did 40 years of damage and 10 years of training. And, I probably would have, I definitely would have ended up right where I am now, but maybe 15 years later, had I known to progress and to do this, right? So we have to learn from our mistakes. And unfortunately, with my hips and my back, there's not a lot of going back right now. But teaching all of you, and hopefully with your personal feat to overcome any of your back or hip issues, because they really do work together. If one is starting to fatigue and fail, the other one's going to pick up the load. And eventually they're both going to go if you don't change the way you're doing things. So had I known better, I think I could have changed a lot, definitely would have thrown a lot further. My career would have lasted a lot longer. But that's all in retrospect. No point in looking back at something like that. Moving forward now, any of you with your physical limitations or issues, hopefully you learned some good things from this today. If you have questions, feel free to fire away either now or to email me or message me later. With any, my client specifically has this, I'm always happy to answer those questions. And, if you have clients that are having some limitations, try some of these exercises with them. I hate to say that it's trial and error with a lot until you have a specific, limitation of L4, L5, S1, these are ruptured. Here's what to do. That's PT, that's doctor, that's therapy. That's different than my back just aches when I do this. And every time I throw it out twice a year, just bending over to get something. These are issues that we're dealing with. The body is compensating because of imbalances. So if we can start to address some of those through these baby steps, then ideally you get to a point where, a lot of that pressure and limitation starts to come off. So hopefully a lot of this kind of resonates with you. You get some good direction from it. I saw Keith threw up another one here. What about knee pain directly related to the back or hip weakness? Knee pain, yeah. So, there's big trickle down from this. Think of yourself like trying to pick, in my example, trying to pick up a hammer or discus off the ground every time I threw it. I would pick it up, drag it back to where I went, sat it down. Once I was ready, I'd pick it up again. I'd go in, I'd throw it, I'd go out, I'd bend over, I'd pick it up again. So I would take 40 throws, that'd be 80 bend overs, plus all of my lifts, plus everything else. Once we hit muscular fatigue and a certain part of your body is just defaulting to whatever it can do, the structure is now supporting that. And let's say that's the back. As soon as that fatigues, it's going to trickle into the hips. As soon as the hips start to fatigue and they're not, in the most efficient positions, it's going to trickle to the knees. I've always kind of coached and worked with people that have back and hip and knee issues. I'd say 80% of the limitations of all three can be modified and dealt with the same way. That's what the Timmerman approach is addressing hip, knee, and back limitations through greater ranges of motion of, say, 90 degrees. And we are able to restrict a lot of that, address the posterior chain, and start to improve a lot of those limitations or prolong life of those if the client is already to the point where they're going to need a replacement or they're going to need a surgery to help fix it. So it's not that we want our clients to be miserable. I have clients that have come in and complained about hip and back, and everything that we try is either not working or it's just barely working a little bit. Then why do you think at 35 I got my hips replaced? Like I didn't do that because I wanted to. I did that because my quality of life was so diminished. I was so miserable. I could not get up and down off the floor to play with my kids. I couldn't dance with my wife. I couldn't do anything. It was just me hanging out on the couch every weekend and my wife like, this is great. And so my quality of life was miserable and it was affecting others around me. So at 35 or 36 years old, I said, let's do this. I want to be comfortable and happy and engaged the next 15 years, if not more, if I can maintain that. And let's say I'm 55, I'm still a relatively young guy to handle another hip replacement to get me to 75. And at that point, I'm probably wheelchair, no kidding. Ideally, we're going to be in a good shape, good shape then too. So just my thoughts, my considerations with this. Quality of life is huge. Some clients are going to have better quality of life after surgery. You need to learn how to assist them in prepping for surgery, getting really strong before that happens. Once surgery occurs, working with the therapist and knowing what you should be doing, what you shouldn't, and going with that timeline. And now you have that knowledge implanted in the next time you work with someone in something similar, or God forbid it happens to you or someone you have that experience. And 90% of this job is taking the content that the experience you've had, and applying it with these people. The other 10% is learning to connect with them and to get them to see the trust of what you are doing, okay? So all that is relative, all of it's important, all of it's specific, but again, it always comes down to each client, how they do, how they feel. And in many cases, it's just trying some of these things to see if it helps. A couple of considerations of things you don't want to do. I would say things that get you below parallel or put your client into deep reflections if they can't maintain them. You saw my skier squats. I'm borderline in the chair, but as soon as I put that 2-inch pad in there, I was nails, right? Like those little things. I can still do the skier squat. I can still do the sit to stand. But if I'm too deep, I'm causing more damage than good, right? So little changes that you can do here and there are gonna drastically affect how your client feels doing that. But you don't have you can't do this, rip it away from them. Can't do that, rip it away. It's just a small modification that's gonna make their engagement in it much more enjoyable and successful, hopefully progressive and getting them better. All right, enough of my soapbox. Any other questions, fire away. This is the moment. I'll give you 5, 4, 3, no more chats, 2. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much. Hope you enjoyed it. I ran a little long, but I appreciate you being on. I will see you tomorrow for overhead polls on Facebook Live, and then I will see you right back here on Wednesday for training with arthritis and the arthritic grace period. Take care, everybody. See ya.